Get ready for the big revival. The real estate revival, that is. Now on 77 WABC, your New York weekend.
Get ready for the big revival.
It's Rand on Real Estate. Look out! With Greg Rand.
All right, welcome to the big real estate revival. This is Greg Rand, your host on 77 WABC and WABCRadio.com. I'm here with Laura Smith, my producer. How are you?
Great to be with you once again.
Yes, great to have you.
Happy summer.
Well, we have a great show on tap for you today. We're going to be talking, as always, about getting rich in real estate. How do you build wealth in the American housing market during the American housing crisis? That's what this show is basically about. We have a lot of cool things to talk about. We're going to talk about how we had a wild roller coaster ride in government this week or in the last couple of weeks, and they made an announcement just a couple of days ago that could have a major impact on helping to solve the foreclosure crisis. We'll kind of break that down for you, make sure you know what you're reading, what you're hearing, and not having to believe what anybody else tells you. We're going to do our usual deep dive into a couple of markets around the country that I'm kind of hot for. One of them is Tampa, St. Petersburg, Florida. We have an expert from the leading real estate company down there, Craig Bagans, who's going to be joining us on the air. And we're going to go back and talk a little more about Atlanta, because I think I gave Atlanta a short shrift last time. I didn't spend enough time telling you why I think that place is such a fantastic opportunity to build wealth. And so we'll dig back into that again. And we're going to take your calls, okay? The best part of the show is hearing from you. So take this number down, 800-848, I almost forgot it, 800-848-9222. That's 800-848-WABC. Give us a call. As always, anything related to real estate, I want to hear from you, okay? I know this thing like the back of my hand. Spent my entire adult life and, geez, half my childhood in the real estate business. My mom was the CEO of a big real estate company, what became a big real estate company up in the suburbs north of here called Better Homes and Gardens, Rand Realty. She's Marsha Rand. She's recovering from a little procedure she had this week, so I hope she's listening and feeling well. I hope Dad's listening too. But yeah, my whole life, man, and this is like running through my veins here. I understand it at the back of my hand. I want you to be the same way. I want you to be excited about this. So call us, 800-848-WABC. Ask questions about if you're particularly interested in Tampa, St. Pete, or Atlanta. That's awesome. But I'll tell you what, I know a lot about a lot of places around this country, and if you've got a market you've got your eye on, call me up. I'll analyze it. We'll talk about it on the fly, and we'll tell you what you can do to do your own homework. You know, here's the thing. I know that you've been dreaming about this. I know that you'd have to be living in a cave not to be aware there's a housing crisis going on, and unless you're really over a barrel, if you've got financial capabilities to make investments right now, you know the housing market is the place you should be thinking. But I have this delusion that while the world is full of people who want to do this, the world is also full of people who don't know how. And so we created my company, OwnAmerica. We created my website, OwnAmerica.com. We created training courses for you for free on that website to teach you how to build wealth in real estate. I wrote a book called Crash Boom. I love that title. Still love it. I'll never get tired of that. What happens after the crash? Well, the boom happens after the crash. So this is all about acknowledging that we're in tumultuous times, acknowledging that we've got a housing crisis going on, but being able to see past it, okay? Being able to see through the fog of recession and to trust the fact that housing in America, as long as people want to come here, as long as they want to live here, as long as people are having kids, as long as population is growing, as long as this remains the best country on the planet, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise, housing here is going to be in demand. And so this crisis presents an enormous opportunity. So that's what the show's about. Make sure you call. If you call, hang on with me, okay? Because I'm going to get to everybody. Again, 848-WABC. The website is WABC.com. We've got listeners we know coming in from all over the country, so we've got a New York area audience, but also I want to hear from people around the country. So
WABCRadio.com.
What did I say?
Sorry, you just said WABC.com.
Well, that's the reason why you're here, to make sure that the training wheels don't fall off here, right?
It's all right.
All right, so let me talk a little bit about what happened. You know, listen, we know, and I'm not going to talk much about this credit downgrade. What I took away from that is basically one thing, and that is it's becoming so painfully clear that they can't solve economic problems out of Washington, okay? And that's a good thing. It's good. It's a good thing to let people try everything they can think of and fail at it to finally realize that the way this country operates is not about telling people what to do, trying to control things centrally. It's all about trying to unleash entrepreneurship. It's about, like, if you go back all the way to Plato and Aristotle, all the way through like Anthony Robbins, okay? The people that understood and understand human nature the best, they know that when it comes right down to it, it's either pursuing pleasure or avoiding pain. All right? Every decision, every conversation you have in your own head, every reaction you have to what happens around you is you either trying to avoid pain or pursue pleasure, or in the case of the founding of this country, pursue happiness. And you can't tell people what to do. You have to put carrots out in front of them. You have to create situations where they're going to act in their own best interest, put their own brain power, their own capital, their own talents into play. And there's a glimmer of hope here, because what you've seen over the last 3 or 4 years out of government when it comes to trying to solve this housing crisis is you've seen one probably well-intentioned, but well-intentioned mistake after another. Almost everything they've done has either not worked or backfired. And they made an announcement a couple of days ago of something that I saw coming a long time ago in some shape or form, and I'm very excited about it. And that is, they announced that they're requesting information. It's a cry for people in the private sector, private sources of capital, potential investors, to give suggestions to the government of how they could convert several 100,000 foreclosed properties that the government now owns, convert them into investor-owned rentals. Okay? Now, this is big, because up until now, it's all been about trying to prevent a foreclosure, trying to help somebody stay in their home by reducing their payments, help them stay in their home by reducing their principal of their balance on their mortgage. Now they're saying, all right, these folks are going to rent. We have an issue here that there's too much demand for rentals right now. Calling all landlords, there's too much demand for rentals right now. It's driving rental rates up, and they want to see if they can't keep rental rates reasonable and create housing opportunities for all these millions of people that are either losing homes, selling homes in short sales, or just not buying homes because they're either scared or they can't get a mortgage right now because the mortgage guidelines have gotten tighter. So what they said basically is that here's what their objectives are. Okay, they want to stabilize home values, okay, by turning some of these properties over instead of letting them languish out there in the foreclosure state. They want to get bank-owned properties or government-owned properties off the books altogether. They want to provide affordable housing, okay? Now, the first two things I was okay with. The last one got me a little bit spooked because, you know, they're making believe that they just came up with this like last week. Like after all this time of thinking about it, the attitude is sort of like, hey, you know, this idea kind of started getting bounced around the boardroom in the White House, and this notion of, you know, could we actually turn these properties into rentals? And I don't buy that when you've got 1 million man-hours of a lot of smart people locked in rooms for 3 years thinking about this challenge, the fact that none of them have come to the conclusion that maybe you're going to need some rentals, I suspect that maybe they've been thinking about this for a long time. And what spooks me a little bit about this crew is that they have a tendency to want to control things. They have a tendency to want to tell people how to be. And so I'm going to show you a couple of things, just tell you a couple of things that they could do, suggestions that me and people like me are going to be making to the government, and we're going to know, because you can't really believe what they say. You have to look at what they do, right? At least we've learned that, okay? What they say and what they do sometimes are so completely opposite that listen to what they say, but take the cues from what they do to know what their objectives really are. For example, over the last several decades, the momentum has been towards creating policy that enabled people to buy homes, okay, to occupy them, creating home ownership. They really weren't that concerned with investors. In fact, they put obstacles in front of investors. For example, today, if a foreclosed property comes on the market, there's a waiting period before an investor can even make a bid on it, okay? They want to give all the potential home buyers out there first shot at every foreclosure. So they need to lift that, right? They have an obstacle in front of investors. They have to lift that obstacle. Right now, FHA has phenomenal programs for people to buy homes, renovate them, but they don't allow investors to use those mortgage programs. So they could decide right now, if they're listening, they could decide, let's just change that rule and make those loans available to investors. Right now, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac-backed mortgages do not allow investors to own more than 4 properties and get any more mortgages from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They could lift that. And right now, if you have a property that has a renter in there and you have a lease, you have to qualify for that mortgage based upon your income, but you can't use the rental income to qualify for the mortgage. Okay, they changed that rule just a few years ago. So there's a lot of systemic things that are in place right now that the government has total control over that they could literally just lift away, just take away and allow the free market to surge forward. Because I'm telling you, I'm seeing everybody from everyday people out in the field and listeners of this show to massive hedge funds with billions of dollars to invest that are looking at the housing market saying, how do we make a play on this distressed marketplace? And if you enable that and create opportunities for them, they're going to take those opportunities. So watch what happens if over the next month and a half, you see the government come back and say, we have a host of new ideas, and we're not going to try to control rents. We're not going to tell these investors what they can rent them for. We're going to sell them the properties. We're going to make them hold them for a couple of years and rent them out, but we're not going to force them to control the rents or whatever. If they do that, then their motives were pure. If, however, they turn this into the new definition of a national housing project, where a couple of million or several 100,000 single-family homes and condos all across the country are now government-owned, Uncle Sam as landlord, then I'll tell you what, that's been the plan all along. That's been the plan for a couple of years, and they were just playing games to get us here. So now you understand what I understand about this proposal. Watch it closely. Tell your friends and neighbors. Let's all watch this closely and make sure they do the right thing. All right, when we come back, we're going to be talking about St. Petersburg, and we're taking your calls. So Dave and Maggie, stay on the line. We're getting right back to you. This is Greg Rand, Rand on Real Estate on 77 WABC. Back in a minute. All right, welcome back to Rand on Real Estate. I'm Greg Rand on 77 WABC, WABCradio.com. My website is OwnAmerica.com. My book is Crash Boom, and my mission is to help you see past the pain and misery of the Great Recession and learn how to make a fortune. So we have a couple of people on hold right now that called, and I want to jump to them, and then we'll get to Craig Beggins, our resident expert on the St. Petersburg and Tampa market in Florida. So Maggie from Fairfield, Connecticut, how are you? Maggie, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks. How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking my call.
Great. What's on your mind?
Here's my question. I'm looking at trying to purchase a condominium down in Florida as an investment for my retirement. That I'm only 50, but in the meantime, I'd like to rent it out. I can certainly afford to pay for this, so it's not a cash flow issue, but what I'm trying to figure out is if I should rent it full-time for a few years and then go in and revamp it before my retirement, or if I should redo it now and rent it out as a monthly snowbird kind of place that people go down and rent for a month at a clip.
That's a really great question. Can you give me an idea of where in the state of Florida you're thinking?
Well, I'm looking at Ormond by the Sea and Palm Coast area over near Cape Canaveral.
Okay, good. I like that area. That's kind of like old Florida. It's not quite as busy as the southern part of Florida. It's drawing a lot of people in from both the north and the south. But you ask a good question. I think a lot of people probably ponder this. If you're in the process of choosing a place that you think you love enough to want to end up retiring there, you don't have to buy a place and then go to that place when you go and visit your destination, okay?
Right.
Because you're 50 and you've got plenty of time ahead of you still before you actually want to move down there, I like the idea of buying the best possible financial rental you can, meaning make the best decision you can from a financial standpoint, and then when you go on vacation, make the best decision you can for that vacation in terms of where you're going to stay. For example, if you look down there and thought about buying a condo like right on the waterfront, okay? The prices you can get for that, the rents you can get for that, when you do the homework and figure out what the cash flow could be. And I know you mentioned you weren't that concerned about cash flow, but I'm talking about building wealth, and I'd like to see you retire in whatever it's going to be, 10 or 15 years, as rich as you can be, okay? And so the idea that you might want to stay when you visit in the nicest waterfront condo you can, but you can rent that condo from somebody else when you stay down there for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks a year, whatever you wind up doing. But you might find that the best use of your capital is to buy something inland by a few miles, okay? Something where you can get a 2 or 3 family or a 4 family building where you can really maximize the potential and look at that building that you buy inland as kind of planting the seed for what's going to wind up being your fabulous waterfront penthouse in 10 or 15 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the concern I have is maintenance. I'm a landlord now where I am, and my concern is getting phone calls from 2 or 3 people that are 1,200 miles away that, have a leaky pipe or something like that. So I was a little bit worried about a multifamily kind of
Yeah, the fear of the
operation
landlord
from a
call.
distance.
There are more people that wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night being afraid of a call from a tenant than like wake up with that dream about being naked in front of the classroom or something, you know. And I totally get that. You're going to want, if it's going to be 1,200 miles away, you're going to want to have a really competent property manager down there. And the best way, and you're going to lose a little bit of your cash flow in terms of paying for that, but you're going to get it back in terms of your peace of mind. Do the homework on the property manager, check references and so forth, because, you know, they have to be super diligent. They have to treat it like it's theirs for you to really to be able to sleep at night up here in New York or in Connecticut. But yeah, so the obvious thing, Maggie, is for you to buy a place right about where you want to be and rent it out either. I like the idea of an annual rental because you can go on vacation wherever you want and you can stay wherever you want, but an annual rental that just nails the financial requirements or the financial obligations you're going to have on that condo gives you the best chance of being able to turn a 12%, a 15% annual return on this investment. And if you buy any time in the next year or two, you're going to see, I think, phenomenal appreciation over the next 5-8 years because the entire state of Florida has overcorrected. So you got lots of options here. You can always email me at greg@ownamerica.com. I appreciate the call, Maggie, very much, and I think that you're on the right track in terms of what you're thinking about and how early you're thinking about it. So good move there. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling. All right, I'm going to jump over to talk to my expert down in Florida. If you're hanging on the line, hopefully you're enjoying the show and you can stay with us. But I want to get over to my buddy Craig Bagans from Century 21 Bagans in Tampa, St. Petersburg. How you doing, Craig?
Hey, Greg. Very good. How are you?
Good, thank you. How's the weather? Is it 99 or 104 down there right now?
Actually, about 95, but I just finished a boat tour with some customers from Michigan. And
Okay.
they fell in love.
All right, we'll talk more about the boat tour in a few minutes. I think what you do with that is great. You show people the view of Tampa St. Pete from the bay and from the water side, which I think is really cool. So a little bit of setup. Craig Bagans is a member of the OwnAmerica network. What we have right now is we're rapidly building a national network of real estate professionals and real estate companies who really know the investment side of real estate and can help to unlock this this massive amount of capital that I believe is out there waiting to come into the American housing market if they feel comfortable with the markets they're going into, and if, like Maggie just said, they feel comfortable with the professionals they're working with at the street level. So Tampa St. Pete, I was down there with Craig. He owns and operates one of the biggest Century 21 real estate companies in the world. Occupies and dominates that entire coast there in Tampa, St. Petersburg, and the surrounding area. And what I always do in this situation, Craig, is I put on my blog some basic data that I want listeners, if they're home in front of a computer, they can do this, or if they're in the car, you're going to want to do this later. But what I've done is I first look at what the heck is going on. Okay, look at a couple of charts and graphs to give me a sense of the facts of what's happening, and then I want to talk to an expert to tell me why it's going on. So I'm staring right now at a chart of the Tampa area home values over the last 10 years, and you and I have already talked about this. It looks like the top of like Mount Kilimanjaro, okay? It goes straight up from 2001 all the way to 2006. It peaks in about 2007, and then it comes practically straight down. And so you're sitting there right now with home prices that are darn similar to what they were back in 2001, right?
Absolutely.
So what caused that meteoric rise and then that meteoric fall in home prices, in your opinion?
You know, Greg, we have a difference between investors and speculators, and really I blame speculators for that rise. We had so much going for us at the time that people would buy without the intent to hold for a long term, and they just kept buying and flipping, and we raised prices so high it was unnatural.
Okay, so I love to hear that from the standpoint of you look at what happened between 2003 and 2006 as the anomaly, right?
Absolutely.
That was the thing that didn't belong. Home prices in Florida have been steadily growing as the population grows, as the job base grows, and then when they kind of went off like a ski jump at the end of that nice gradual curve, that was something that could not sustain itself. And now we've come down, but I think we've come down too far. Are you seeing that sentiment in the marketplace?
No question about it. When you can buy a house for less than it costs to build and you get the premium land for free, there's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem, and then there's a huge opportunity. If I scroll a little bit further down on my blog, I also have this chart that you and I have spoken about, which is the migration patterns in Hillsborough County, which is where Tampa is. And we see a massive amount of migration still coming into your county, and it's coming in from all the major population centers in the Northeast in a very big way. But it's interesting, it's also coming from Miami, Naples, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach. What's happening where you are that's drawing Floridians to come across the state and come to you?
It's interesting, Greg, but Florida is considered a waterfront state, although we don't have a whole lot of waterfront. But if you go anywhere around the state of Florida, the waterfront is very expensive. But when you come to Hillsborough County or Pinellas County, we have offices in Pinellas too, the waterfront is drastically undervalued compared to waterfront areas elsewhere. So I think when you're comparing Miami and Fort Lauderdale or even Naples, they're looking at land that a house is $3 million in Naples, so you can buy a house here for a third that price. That's a comparable building.
Interesting. So you're competing with other parts of Florida. Hey, Craig, hang on. We're going into a break now, but I want to keep this going. This is Greg Rand. You're listening to Rand on Real Estate. We're going to be back in a minute talking more about the west coast of Florida. Hang on with us. All right, welcome back to Rand on Real Estate. A little Led Zeppelin there for you. Love the bumper music today, Mike.
Love it.
All right, so we're talking about Tampa and St. Petersburg with Craig Beggins of Century 21 Beggins. That's c21beggins.com, right, Craig?
Correct.
All right, so people who want to find you can find you there. We were just talking about how it's really interesting. If you look at the migration chart that I put on my blog at OwnAmerica.com, you can see people are coming to your market from other parts of South Florida, which is cool because the entire state is on sale right now. And the fact that you've got that advantage where you're actually pulling people, there's got to be something else going on in terms of jobs and lifestyle that makes this Tampa-St. Pete area a choice that other Floridians are making. So can you give me kind of a flavor of the culture down there and the job situation?
It's funny, Greg, since I've been involved with your program, I've been training my agents on this. And we actually listened to a radio show that you did about Fort Myers market. And I asked the agents, I said, what's the difference about the Tampa market over Fort Myers? And we went through the marketplace and said, are we an agricultural economy? And the answer is yes. We have a strong agricultural base. Plant City is one of the biggest producers of strawberries in the country. But we're not dependent on strawberries or any other agriculture for that point. Do we have a military installation? Yes. We have McDill Air Force Base, which is home of CENTCOM, which controls all the Middle East operations of the United States Marine Forces or the Armed Forces. But we're not dependent on military. We've got a huge corporate base. We've got a beautiful downtown. We've got a beautiful interstate structure. We've got just you name it. We've got tourist attractions. We have Busch Gardens. We have beautiful beaches. We have a whole bunch of different economic factors driving our market, but we're not dependent on any one of them.
That's interesting. That's huge. Being a New Yorker outside the New York area, I've always seen how one of the big advantages of our metro area is that there's no one industry that can go sideways. Even when Wall Street goes sideways, which is such a major economic driver here in New York, it's so diverse in terms of the number of companies that are here. And you've got kind of a microcosm of that down there. You've got the shipping, you've got the agriculture, you've got all these different pieces, and you're not dependent on any one of them, which means it's just more robust, right?
I think so.
And it's also kind of laid back. I got a vibe down there that's a little bit, there's a little, I don't know, is it a little slice of Key West going on down there? Is that what I'm sensing?
Yeah, definitely. I moved from Miami, and Miami is definitely more fast-paced. The west coast of Florida is definitely more laid back, easier going, not as much hustle and bustle.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hey, you know what, Craig, we have a good opportunity here. We have Mike from Holtzville who's called in, who has questions about some things about St. Petersburg, Florida. So let's bring Mike into the conversation. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great, Craig.
Well, thanks for calling and thanks for holding. We got Craig Beggins here. So you called about St. Petersburg. I've got you an expert.
Thanks for taking my call today. You got a great show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So what's on your mind?
Well, I'm calling. I've been going down to Tampa, St. Pete now for about 10 years because I go to spring training to see the Yankees. I spent about 2 or 3 weeks catching some games, and I just love the area. And what I'm trying to do is to buy an owner finance property because I don't think my credit is credit-worthy right now to get a mortgage. But I do have sufficient cash flow. I have my own business. What I'd like to do is be able to purchase something with just maybe a 5 to 7 year mortgage. What's the best way that I can attract a homeowner like that?
Interesting question. Craig, you want to handle that one?
Well, I'll give it a stab. Your name was it Joe?
Mike.
No, Mike.
Mike, you got an interesting challenge because you said your credit is what's keeping you from being financed by a bank.
Mm-hmm.
You're really dealing with a smaller pool of properties. Not everybody's going to be willing to sell to you. Not saying that nobody will be, because certainly somebody will. I think I would first put together, just like you were applying to a bank, you're going to need to show a seller your true intentions and your ability to repay. And then you're really going to need a good real estate agent to represent you. To say, look,
Well, absolutely. I believe in that. I've been a realtor for 20 years.
okay,
So let me jump in here a second. One of the things about this also is that you do have one advantage, Mike, in that there are people trying to sell properties that can't. Right now, in the case down in your marketplace, I know things are starting to heat up down there. I know prices are stabilizing. I know sales, Craig, year over year are way up compared to 2010.
yes.
Are you seeing inventory burning off quickly, or do you still see people that own homes and condos that are struggling to unload them right now?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Greg, we're down from 21,000 units in the greater Tampa MLS to just over 10,000 units today, from 2007 to today. So our inventory's declined 50%. At the same time, our sales have gone from 900 units a month to over 2,000 units a month. Our inventory supply has gone from 21 months down to 5.8 months. So things are correcting down here.
Okay, so it's not exactly an ideal time to go to people who are trying to sell properties and say, hey, I've got an opportunity for you, but you have to hold financing for it.
No, but at the same time, I've got to say that there's a lot of people that have been holding on too long. We've got a big percentage of distressed properties, short sales. Property values drop so far that some people need to sell, but they can't afford to sell because they owe too much. Mike said something interesting. He said on a 5 to 7 year note, that would be a very interesting payment, because that would be a much higher payment than somebody would be making on a normal term loan from a bank. He might be able to find a seller who's been holding on that can't sell because he owes too much. He might be able to owner finance it and still make his mortgage payment, because Mike was able to pay more monthly than his mortgage is.
Well, they also might find having somebody to pay 6 or 7% interest rather than what they're getting from a bank, probably something good on an installment plan also.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you, Mike, to give your number to the people here that have put you on hold, and we'll put you in touch with Craig and see if we can find a solution. And if we can, we'll revisit this in a future show and show how, we're all about solutions here. So, Mike, I appreciate your call very much. Thanks for waiting on hold with us, and have a great day.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, so Craig, tell me more about, you were starting to say that the job situation down there was strong. Are you seeing companies expanding or companies moving there now?
We're still feeling the national pressures of unemployment.
Okay.
But locally, Tampa, if you read the newspaper every day, there's always a new company moving in, because our housing is so cheap, our cost of living is so good, and our environment is so great to live in. So I think the Tampa market, I really don't know offhand. I'd have to look at the stats. But I would say we're probably a little bit ahead of the national curve on recovery on unemployment.
All right, sounds good. And one of the things that really struck me when I was down there is that, give me an example of a 3-bedroom house in one of your more high-value, affordable communities there.
Well,
price-wise, and what you could rent it for.
Big difference. We have 5 offices in our marketplace, from Hillsborough County, which is the big market, the base land. Then we have the Gulf Beaches, which is right against the Gulf of Mexico. Huge price disparity between the two.
So give me the ones that are inland. Give me the ones that are, there are some numbers there that I know are going to pop the people's.
Oh, it's going to scare you. Homes that we were selling in 2005, which was 6 years ago, for $220,000, $230,000 for a 1,600 square foot, brand new at the time, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,600 square foot house, are selling today as a short sale or a foreclosure. Are you sitting down?
Yeah.
$90,000.
$90,000, yeah. And there are even some places, when we were there, you talked to me about a 2-bedroom villa, detached villa that was on the market for $38,000.
Oh, we got one. I'm a Fannie Mae broker as well. We just got one from Fannie Mae, $18,000.
$18,000. And what could that rent for?
That house, that's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo in a deed-restricted community with full amenities. That house would rent for probably $600 or $700 a month.
All right. So if you bought a house for under $20,000 and rented it for $600 or $700 a month, you're talking about a 15 or 18% return on your money, and you got the potential for that house that's selling for a ridiculously low number to make its way back to $75,000, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 in value over the next 10 years. And folks, that is what we're talking about on this show, and that's why we bring you to places like Tampa and St. Pete and introduce you to people like Craig Beggins, because when you're here in the Northeast and you hear, $20,000 is the tax bill on a house in most neighborhoods where people are listening to from.
Yeah, you can't finance those. You got to pay cash. The banks don't want to lend money on those little purchases.
Right. So you use your down payment, and the whole thing is a down payment because it's only $20,000. So anyway, this is why we want to bring this to the attention of people up here, because Florida, there's a place in our heart for Florida here in the New York area. And when you start looking at, come off the coast by a few miles, start seeing the kind of values that you can get, and the fact that there's a robust job market, a lot of migration coming into the area, and people want to rent properties right now because they're losing their homes to foreclosure, what you have is a recipe for a gold mine later on when the market revives. So, Craig, thank you very much for being on the air with us. That's Craig Beggins from Century 21 Beggins, c21beggins.com. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks, Greg.
All right, thank you. All right, you're listening to Rand on Real Estate. We're going to go back to a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Atlanta. And don't forget to give me your calls. We have time for a few more calls. The number here is 800-848-WABC. That's 800-848-9222. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Rand on Real Estate. I'm Greg Rand, your host on WABC, 77 WABC. Our phone number here is 800-848-WABC. And we have a couple of good calls here. And we just lost one. He must have been on a cell phone and gotten dropped. And I just want to address the question that he asked. And that was, he said, why are you so optimistic about the housing market? With all the news that's going on out there, all the negativity, why am I so positive? And I just wanted to reinforce this message one more time for people who maybe haven't heard it before. It's American housing, okay? People like living indoors. People like living in America. This is the most fundamental asset class known to mankind. It is the most prolific way of building wealth if you do it right. And if all of your concern or lack of confidence or insecurity about the housing market is based upon what is done for the last few years, understand this was all explainable, okay? We deviated from the right way of doing housing. The right way, people buy a home they like, in a place they like. They live in it for a long time. They paid the mortgage off, okay? They ended up living rent-free in their old age, passed down to their kids. Or they buy a piece of real estate, plug a tenant in there, and the tenant lives there, or tenants live there over a long period of time, pay that mortgage off. They wind up mortgage-free with a paid-off asset later on in life. What we did in the last 10 years was treat it like a cash machine, live off the home equity, buy into this fallacy that not only does it always go up, by the way, it does always go up over time, but not at 15% a year, okay? 3% a year, 4% a year when you even out all the ebbs and flows. When we started getting used to this idea that it's like a tech stock, that you can double your money in 7 years in a real estate purchase, and when the banks started forgetting what they knew about all this and started giving away no money down financing for people with weak credit scores, all of that was basically us doing it wrong, okay? So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Go to my website. There is a course there for free for real estate investors. The first thing I do in the course is give you the historical perspective. I show you charts and graphs of housing cycles going back to 1940, all right? And when you see how it goes the same way, up and then down, up and then down, if it's too drastically up, it comes down more drastically. But when it all evens out, we've got a long-term trajectory of appreciation in housing that only gets interrupted when we mess it up and get too hot and too greedy and too wild, which is what happened during the roaring 2000s, okay, over the last few years. So you can have confidence, and if you're not sure you buy into this, take the course, buy the book, listen to the show, absorb this message, because I'm telling you, I'm right. I know what I'm talking about, and you're going to look back in 10 years and say, darn it, I missed another boom because I got dragged down by the bust. And we know these things follow a cycle. So I want to jump over to Pauline from Beach Lakes, Pennsylvania. Interested, had a good question for me. What do you got for me, Pauline?
Okay, my question is this. I'm interested in a property, and it's a short sale. And I just wanted to find out what the drawbacks would be for a buyer, or should I just, just pass that property over?
Not necessarily. The drawback, a short sale, for people who aren't sure what that means, is when the person selling the property owes more in their mortgage or mortgages than the house is worth, okay? And so what has to happen is you have to get the bank's approval as the seller to sell the property. Because the house is worth $200,000 and you owe $250,000, the bank's going to take a haircut there, and so now they're in the mix. You're not just negotiating between an owner selling a property and a buyer wishing to buy it. You've got a bank in the mix. And the banks are busy right now with foreclosures and short sales, and so as a buyer, the drawback is you might wind up waiting months. You're likely to wind up waiting a couple of months just to get an answer, okay? If you can handle that, you have a major advantage because you could also get a phenomenal deal. So, Pauline, are you going to be moving into this place, and do you have a really tight time frame in terms of when you need to move in?
No, I have an open time frame.
Well, then investors love short sales, and banks like when investors buy short sales because investors say, I'll wait for you, bank. here's my offer, let me know when you can get it done. If you have timing on your side, you are an ideal short sale buyer. So the advantage is if you're the only person bidding on that property and the bank comes to the conclusion that, okay, this is what the market bears, you can get yourself a fantastic deal. So I would go for it.
My question also is this. Would they negotiate on the price? In other words, if I submit my low ball, would they come back with a counter offer?
Yeah, they're all kind of different. But, yes, if you come in, I would not come in so much with a low ball, honestly. From a negotiating perspective, going in and offering what is a fair – see, because they're getting bombarded with a lot of people who had the same idea, all right? And they can sort of stigmatize you as somebody who's not serious. If you come in with a reasonable offer on the low end of the range, you stand a chance of them accepting it, okay? As opposed to – and, you know, they might counter also, but I don't buy into the low ball thing because that's a little bit of a back of the napkin, a back of the cocktail napkin business plan doesn't usually work. Where if you come in reasonable, you stand a good chance of them maybe grabbing it, and you get a great deal then.
Okay.
All right, thanks for calling. Okay, we've got Dan from Rockland County. How you doing, Dan?
Hi, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing fine. What do you got for me?
I was one of those people that Craig was just talking about. My wife and I, with a friend of ours, 50-50, bought an investment property in the Tampa St. Pete area in 2006. Long story short, we now owe more than the property is worth, and I want to sell it. My partners and us would not qualify for a short sale, so I've sort of been bickering with my partner because he doesn't want to go through the credit risks with, selling it for less than it's worth, and I just want to dump it. And I'm not sure what to do. I don't know if your last guest could help me out. It's in Reddington Beach in the Tampa St. Pete area.
Okay,
it's on the Gulf.
We should grab your phone number also after we finish the call here and put you in touch with Craig because he's got boots on the ground there. Mm-hmm. But in general, are you able to rent the place out? I mean, is there a tenant in there right now?
Yes, there is.
And how is that? Is that it's not covering the cost?
No, it's not. It helps, but it doesn't cover the cost.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that you don't qualify for a short sale, and what that means to everybody who's not sure is that you have to show some degree of hardship to be able to get a bank to take a haircut. And if you can't show that hardship, the bank says, hey, stick with it or sell the property and pay us the difference.
Right.
Which is always an option also.
It's for people who make too much money and they don't get any accommodation.
Yep, and that's and that makes sense when you think about it. The bank's saying, hey, we're not in the business of undoing people's decisions that didn't work out the way they had hoped. How much money are you losing on the property on a monthly basis? In terms of rent?
Is all the expenses versus rent about $1,800 a month.
$1,800 a month that you're losing. Okay. So the idea is that, and how much underwater are you in terms of what you owe and what it's worth now?
Well, because of these short sales, the prices have dropped immensely. We paid almost $700,000, and they're selling in the high threes now. And our mortgage is $560.
Okay, so the equation you're doing with your partner is if we're losing $1,800 a month, but if we sold the property short and the bank wouldn't give us a break, we owe $200-something thousand. Well, how many months of $1,800 worth of a loss would end up adding up to that shortfall? Because there's a good chance you have to write a check.
That's exactly right.
And the third option is that you default on it and you let it damage your credit, which I'm not a big fan of. The truth is, if you have the ability to hold this thing, it will come back in value. I know it's hard to believe, okay? But 10 years from now, it's going to come back in value. Your options are real simple. Default on it altogether, strategically default, and let the banks take it away and let your credit get damaged, but you're going to be out of the mortgaging market for 7 years. Okay, they're going to lock you out for 7 years. And so if you've got plans to buy real estate going forward, maybe you hedge this thing. Maybe you buy other real estate now, dollar cost averaging. Buy some more property now at the low point and try to blend your losses with gains, and undo the decision. If you bought stock at a high point and then it went down, one of the things the stockbrokers recommend is buy it at the low point and average your buy-in price with a better buy-in number.
Laddering.
Yep. All right, so listen, I'm sorry you're in a sticky spot there, but definitely give your number, and we'll get in touch with Craig and see if he can come up with some solutions for you.
Thanks, Craig.
Okay, I have really a short period of time left, but I want to take a call from Kathy from Brooklyn before we end the show. Kathy, how are you?
Okay, I hope I can make a long story short.
Okay.
I bought this house, $22,000, and I'm here 42 years. Now it's worth $500,000. Couple on the block's been sold, and they've under contract. But I don't drive, I'm 68 years old, and I have two dogs and a cat, and everybody says you can't go to Florida.
Well, you can, okay? Believe it or not, there's a lot of people in Florida who don't drive and have pets. Do you have your eye on a particular market in Florida?
No, not really. It's just always been on my mind, and they acting very negative towards me for that.
Okay, well, you know what? Here's the thing. Florida has got a few million residents who fit the same profile as you, okay? They're not driving anymore. There are communities that have all the amenities on site, and they have been designed for retirees who want to have the lifestyle, have the climate, and not and don't necessarily drive. So you know what? Give us your number when we come off the call here, and let's get you in touch with Craig and his group down there, because there are places for you down there, Kathy. I really appreciate your call, and I promise you, whoever's telling you otherwise, they don't know Florida like I know Florida. So thanks very much for the call. All right, so we're coming to the end here. I did it again. I left not enough time to talk about Atlanta, so I'm going to have to kick Atlanta to the next show. But you can go to my site, go to my blog. There's a whole bunch of data there on Atlanta, and there's a big buying opportunity at the bottom of my blog of properties that are putting off 12 to 15% returns right now for sale with tenants in fully renovated single-family homes in Atlanta. So take a look at that at the bottom of the blog. Thank you so much for listening. This is Greg Rand from Rand on Real Estate. This has been brought to you by OwnAmerica.com. 77 WABC. Thanks for listening.